Next question has to do with how do you create a light bulb moment in an organization? You know, what is it that really brings all the pieces together? What are the methods that you use? I've known that in my career, I've put together panels of very disparate types of people, including chemists and nurses and physicists and accounting people and people who are in reimbursement and having all those different perspectives. You know, for me, has a lot to do with creating all the perspectives that you need for that light bulb moment. And so I think the next question has to do with how do we create that environment, that culture, and those methods that succeed, you know, at fostering great work.
Well, I'll start, and I'm sure Craig and I, so we work with similar groups. So the one thing that I see the most common over the 25 years that I've been doing this kind of innovation work, to achieve that light bulb moment, the one thing that's the most powerful tool is misunderstanding. Misunderstanding has been the key to those light bulb moments. And what I mean by that is you get a group of people together and it's all about the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So you get a group and that group starts working and you start sharing ideas and somebody misunderstands the idea that someone else tried to articulate and it leads to a thought that nobody else had, because it's an idea, a kernel of an idea on top of a kernel of idea on top of a kernel of idea that made somebody think of something that they wouldn't have otherwise thought of. And that's really where I've seen most of the innovative ideas occur.
I would agree with that. The cross-functional teams work well for that. And you know, in looking back at the places where I've seen really light bulb moments, it's really been when you have those multifunctional teams. Maybe they're immersed in the customer experience. Maybe some of them are experts more on the clinical side. Maybe some of them are experts on the design side, user interface. Maybe some of them are experts, you know, in the engineering area. And then really immersing in that experience, working together really to identify and solve the problems that are seen, because you can't necessarily rely on your customer research to identify all the possible solutions, right? Or even all the possible problems. Sometimes people are so locked in the way they do things, they don't even realize that there could be a better way to do something. So I think those multifunctional teams work well in that process of really finding the ideas in the middle between the functions.
You don't, you're not implying we shouldn't do the research, but it's what you do with it and how the team works with it. I think the first step is to really do the research correctly, to identify your users. Your user isn't just your end user. You know, now, you know, if we were designing something for a surgeon, he's not buying the device typically. It's a purchasing organization. So, you know, everybody within this, the clinical organization is part of the user groups. All the way from who sets up the device to who disposes it or reprocesses it. So, you know, understanding that the user groups are wide, that the environments, every single one of them varies. You know, we go into ORs all the time to observe surgeries, and there's probably not one. I mean, generally they follow the same, you know, workflows, but, you know, that's kind of the key to enabling this diverse group of people to really come up with something to do, is to try and understand a wide breadth, or broad stroke of the users, the environments, the workflows, the other products, the ancillary products that they're working with, and, you know, to understand that there is that wide variety, and that you're not just, you know, we have a lot of clients that maybe want to go out and talk to their KOLs, so they're, you know, their key opinion leaders have an opinion, and usually they're not the same as your average user, right? The FDA is concerned about your average user. So, you know, arm that group, but then having that cross-functional team work together, I totally agree that, you know, those brainstorming moments can be great when you've already done the groundwork and make people think a little differently, and then really have different disciplines represented in that brainstorming process.
I typically, I don't want regulatory people or lawyers in the room when we're trying to create light bulbs, okay? Because they're wet blankets, okay? I want them in the room later, though. So I'm just curious about that. You know, on the one hand, you know, and I wouldn't mind a salesperson in the room, because a great idea could be just something that reduces the sales cycle, yeah. Right? So, but I just curious about the higher, in your experience, because I don't do what you guys do. So in your experience, is there a way when you layer in that diverse group? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, do
Yeah.
you really want the regulatory person in the room telling you everything you're thinking of is ridiculous?
Well, the more wet blanket people you have in the room, the stronger moderator you need
Yeah.
for the brainstorming and ideation session. It can be done, but you need somebody that can control it well.
It's not necessarily true that, you know, every regulatory person couldn't participate. I mean, you know, I mean, and if you set it up correctly and have the right kind of rules for engagement, you know, that, you know, there's no bad ideas, you know, the typical brainstorming things that build on ideas, et cetera. You know, I've had good experiences with very broad cross-functional teams. It's just, you know, managing that process, you have to do it correctly, right? Even our IP lawyers, we bring into brainstorming sessions because they're very helpful sometimes, right? Because they're familiar with the prior art and can kind of help, you know, push ideas a given direction just based on that knowledge of what's already out there.
And I think there's a multi-stage process, and we believe that sort of that research and understanding of all those things out there and driving that into the cross-functional group that's doing the brainstorming, but you're not necessarily going to end whatever that, you know, session is, if it's a multi-day, multi-week, or whatever. You're not going to end it with that thing that you're going to then go commercialize. You're going to typically have a bunch of great ideas. They're going to vary in complexity, in cost to develop, cost to produce, effectiveness to clinical application. And then often those other folks who may not be sort of open-minded thinker, you know, it's important to be divergent, but at some point you have to converge on that best solution. And so bring the IP people in, bring the regulatory in, and they can be filters to weeding down to the best.
Honing it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.